Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 7th of September 2022, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. Your host today, Mike Robinson, myself, Brian Gerrrish. We're delighted to be joined by Mark Anderson from the United States. And we have Debi Evans, our very own nursing correspondent, with us today.
Well, it's a day of celebration, of course, because Liz Truss has entered number 10, and there she is going in yesterday. Wasn't that exciting? Are you impressed?
No, I'm not impressed. I think this lady's going to demonstrate that she's one of the most dangerous prime ministers we have had to date. That's my prediction. I may be wrong.
Okay, well, she gave a little speech outside number 10, so let's just listen to a short excerpt from that.
As Prime Minister, I will pursue three early priorities. Firstly, I will get Britain working again. I have a bold plan to grow the economy through tax cuts and reform. We'll get spades in the ground to make sure people are not facing unaffordable energy bills, and we will also make sure that we are building hospitals, schools, roads and broadband.
So my first thoughts on this, Brian, are, well, how are we going to be building, or why are we going to be building roads when we're stopping people driving as rapidly as we are? But how are we going to be building hospitals and schools when, as we were reporting on Monday, still steel mills are closing due to the energy crisis, according to this headline. Well, we're going to come on to it a little bit later, but more and more companies within insolvency reach.
Yeah, she doesn't understand this. I'm convinced that at the moment she does not understand what the world economic situation is. She thinks she understands it, but she doesn't.
Well, okay, we'll come on to that. Let's get another little clip here.
Secondly, I will deal hands-on with the energy crisis caused by Putin's war. I will take action this week to deal with energy bills and to secure our future energy supply.
So she's going to secure our future energy supply, but it's Putin's fault. It's all Putin's fault, of course. But then later on, she said this, we have huge reserves of talent, energy and determination. And I was thinking, well, if we've got huge reserves of energy, then what's the problem? But anyway, Hugh Pill was speaking to the Treasury Select Committee this morning. He's, of course, is the chief economist of the Bank of England. He had this to say. One of the things that does seem to be under consideration is a change to the relationship between gas prices and retail gas prices in a direction that will lower headline inflation relative to what we're forecasting. So what was he talking about? Well, Liz is apparently about to announce that she's going to put a price cap on, a proper price cap on the cost of energy. But if we just put that back on screen for a second, I just wanted to highlight the fact that what he said, headline inflation, and that's the key point, because what they're talking about is putting a price cap on what consumers pay for energy. But of course, that doesn't do anything to change the actual price that energy is costing. So the government is going to have to make up the difference. So it's only the headline inflation figure which is going to change. So let's put up the graph that we put on a couple of days ago showing the forecast for energy price cap in the UK. And as you can see, in October, it will rise to £3,550 from £1,971 for the average household per year. That's what they'll have to pay on gas and electricity. Well, she is apparently about to announce that cap will reduce to £2,500. Actually, that's a misprint there, so apologies for that. So she's going to take that down to £2,500. So if we put the original graph back on screen again and draw the £2,500 line on there, what she's effectively saying is that the British government is going to pay the difference, pay everything that's on the right-hand side of that line to the energy companies, because their priority is to make sure that these energy companies don't go out of business. And so they're going to pay all that money. The forecasts are that that's going to cost something in the region of 100 to 150 billion pounds, depending on how long that process takes. So she may, what she's basically doing is hoping that the price of energy comes down in the meantime, and that they can stop paying this money by April 23 or by July 23. But of course, that isn't going to happen. So the British government, therefore, is going to borrow huge amounts of money new money into the economy to try to cover these costs and make sure that people aren't going personally bankrupt and so on. But this is not going to do anything for inflation except for potentially headline inflation. In fact, it'll be quite the opposite because it's even more money. So let's bring Andrew Bailey. He was also speaking to the Treasury Select Committee this morning. It's not for us to comment on what fiscal policy will be, and we will wait and see what it is. So he isn't sure what effect any of this change is going to have on, for example, interest rates and mortgage rates. They may try to justify even bringing interest rates back down again, but based on this headline inflation figure, which is completely fake. Yes, interesting times ahead.
Very interesting. Yeah.
So let's go on to the final little clip from Liz here and see what she had to say. Oh, just before we do that, actually, this comment about building hospitals and whatnot, she didn't say anything about staff. So I'm quite sure, maybe they'll manage to build some hospitals or whatever, but I'm not quite clear how they're going to staff them.
Well, I think a figure of 50,000 extra staff has been mentioned. I don't know whether Debbie can correct or add to this or correct me, but I think these are all coming from overseas, is the impression I get.
Debbie?
Yeah, you're correct. But my thoughts are that we won't need staff in hospitals. The hospitals have almost become already secure units. And I know we'll talk about that maybe later or in extra, but hospitals won't need staff. They'll all be automated. So, and we know that a lot of the hospitals are being financed by pharma companies and cancer research, and we're having a new cancer research hospital in Cambridge. So much of this is going to be remote.
Yeah.
Yes.
A transformation is the term they're using, and we'll show you a bit of what they're planning a little bit later in this news edition.
Well, let's just listen to this final 10-second clip here.
Thirdly, I will make sure that people can get doctor's appointments and the NHS services they need. We will put our health service on a firm footing.
And the only thing I can say to that is, yeah, right.
Well, yeah, I think we're going to discover a little bit more about Ms. Truss in a minute, but let's just remind ourselves of how Boris left. And this Guardian picture I just found extraordinary. I don't know what the message that was supposed to be given to the public was, but the lady in the see-through red dress, was this appropriate dress for the outgoing Prime Minister, or was this some sort of message? I think the interesting thing about it is we finally got to the stage. Well, it's the Empress with no clothes, but I think really it's Boris with no clothes. Betrayed his family, really betrayed the country. He's leaving amidst cheers and claps. But let's listen to a little bit of the speech that he made as he departed. It's very interesting.
Above all, thanks to you, the British people, to the voters for giving me the chance to serve, all of you who worked so tirelessly together to beat COVID, to put us where we are today. Together, we have laid foundations that will stand the test of time, whether by taking back control of our laws or putting in vital new infrastructure. Great, solid masonry on which we will continue to build together, paving the path of prosperity now and for future generations. And I will be supporting Liz Truss and the new government every step of the way. Thank you all very much. Thank you and goodbye. Thank you.
Well, all about building and masonry, apparently, and bringing in our laws. I don't think those are anything to do with laws which are going to help the people of this country. So what was Boris really what message was he really conveying to the audience in talking about the foundations and good masonry? I don't know. But we'll bring in the incoming Empress because she was fascinated in the green dress. With a little chain apron, and this was clearly being pushed at the general audience. So what is the governing elite in UK, and who do they work for? Well, we're not too sure, but we thought we'd just like to remind our audience of Boris Johnson's interest with the Palmyra Arch of Triumph, which was recreated in London back in 2016 when he was mayor. And of course, this has some really dark and devious connotations, but my goodness, was he excited about it. So we'll just leave you with those thoughts as to who's really controlling the country.
So let's look at the range of puppets that we've got in key roles in the cabinet. So Kwasi Kwarteng MP is Chancellor of the Exchequer. I wonder what qualifications he's got. Well, he's got a PhD in British history from Cambridge. He worked as an analyst for a short time at JP Morgan Chase and then in journalism before he went into politics. So maybe that gives him enough. James Cleverly there on the right-hand side, Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs. He's got a degree in hospitality management, Brian. So, well, I mean, if you're foreign minister, foreign secretary of state for foreign affairs, clearly you're mainly running hospitality events as you execute your soft power, perhaps. Maybe that qualifies him for that. He was education secretary since July, and then he was a junior minister in the Foreign Office. And then we've got Suella Braverman here. She's Secretary of State for the Home Office. Well, what's her background? Well, not barrister. Yes, sorry.
Oh, well,
still reading that. She's a barrister, so that should be good enough for that.
So she'll be struggling with the pay.
Yes,
and the background for that.
Brandon Lewis, he's another qualified barrister, so maybe he's appropriate for Secretary of State for Justice. Ben Wallace and James Heapy, well, they have stayed in post because, of course, they're prosecuting a war at the moment, so it's fair enough that they stay there, right? But you'll notice that James Heapy has also taken on the role of Minister for Veterans because, and his name rapidly, Johnny Mercer, thank you, yeah. Our Plymouth MP here, has been sacked from that role. And then Therese Coffey, she is Secretary of State for Health. Well, she worked for Mars at one point and as in finance, as a finance manager, and also as a BBC as a finance manager as well. So clearly, working for the BBC, she's used to running big budgets, which maybe makes it appropriate that she's become health minister. But and then the other key one here that I wanted to highlight was Michelle Donlan, who nobody will have heard of, but she's become Secretary of State for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport, and will therefore be responsible for pushing the online safety bill through. And what's her qualifications for that? Well, she, before she entered politics, was in marketing, including working for Marie Claire magazine and the World Wrestling Entertainment Series, so WWE. So that's great. Now, as for Liz, who was the first person? Can we guess who the first person was that Liz called when she became?
Well, I have a bit of an advantage, but I'm going to say vote Ms. Truss, get Zelensky.
Yes, indeed. So apparently the phone call went like this. Hello, Vladimir. You were first on my list. And indeed he was. But it's quickly followed by Joe. So she phoned Joe straight after. She said, hello, Joe. Loved your speech. Of course, talking about the speech that we were talking about on Monday's programme. We have a special relationship. Let's build that global military. So she was talking about NATO and AUKUS and how the UK and the US could better push those forward, and you've suggested that AUKUS perhaps is in fact part of global NATO as is coming.
Oh, I'm sure that this is what's being built, Mike. But I couldn't resist this one. I've been a bit naughty because she was wearing dark blue, not black. But here's the Mail with the headline: Liz shows no mercy. I think this headline is absolutely right. This lady is capable of doing all sorts of things which are going to horrify the nation. Liz Truss culls every Rishi Sunak supporter from cabinet, but now she faces the prospect of mauling from backbench big beast. This is all terrible language by the Mail, but my take on it is, well, the elderly have been culled in this country, and so to use the word cull in relation to politics in Westminster, absolutely spot on by the Mail. And this lady you've just shown, Theresa Coffey, Mike, inherits the NHS in crisis. No, the NHS is not in crisis, it's being transformed. Debi, you've been following this lady for a little bit of time. What are your thoughts? Is the NHS in safe hands?
No. I'm just going to fire off a few little bullet points about not Miss or Right Honourable Theresa Coffey, but Dr. Theresa Coffey. Yes, she's a doctor, and even better, we've now got a pharmacist, a chemist, running the NHS. So she received a PhD from Somerville. Oh, Somerville College. That was same place as June Rain and Margaret Thatcher as well, who also had a PhD in chemistry. So Theresa Coffey has a PhD in chemistry. She likes a cigar. And she admits she's self-declared overweight and she's a smoker. And she says she's not a role model. She's going to leave that to other people. She's a football fan. She called for the knighthood for Kenny Dalglish, I believe. And she's also a big karaoke fan. So Time of My Life, you can see it on YouTube. She's very she's got good rhythm. She's also goes without sleep. So she is questioning data apparently all the time. So as health secretary, I am really going to be very keen to ask her to question the MHRA's data, because apparently she really scrutinizes it. She rips up things and she does her own thing. She's Liz Truss's best mate. They've been best friends for ages. And she's got an emergency plan. So she's going to roll out an emergency plan for the NHS next week. And this is going to be the mantra, folks. It's going to be, and you're going to hear it loads of times, 4-word phrase: ambulances, ABCD. That's what she's calling it, ABCD. So we're talking ambulances, backlog, care, doctors and dentistry. So what she's going to do is she's going to incentivize doctors to stay in the NHS by offering them some pension tax breaks. So we've got all of that to come. And of course, let's not forget that the DWP, which is where she's come from, that was at the centre of Drinksgate, not Partygate, as in Boris, but I believe they had a few drinkies. And her history, you know, she has been questioned a number of times about different issues. So Coffey is going to be a very interesting person to follow. But basically, we've got a pharmacist running the NHS. Do I feel confident? No.
No. I'll just say, I believe that when you have friends at that level, they're known as besties. Okay, now the UK column has been warning and warning about the government's use of applied psychology. Just want to bring your minds back to the key Cabinet Office document, Mindspace of 2010. We've talked about it many times, but in case there's anybody that still hasn't gone to look at the information, and of course David Halpern was the key man driving this policy forward, but he was also linked into a senior lecturer in psychology, Faculty of Medicine at Imperial College. And we just put up a little bit more detail on screen because, of course, potential for controversy, that was actually recognised in the document. And the government was being a bit squeamish because what it was effectively saying was that if the public really understood what we're doing, we could be in for big trouble. Why? Because the government was boasting they could change people's behaviour. That is the way they think and their behaviour, and people wouldn't know that was happening, or if they realised something had changed in their lives, they wouldn't know how it was done. So imagine the politicians that we've just described being able to unleash this technology on the public mind. Well, some very interesting research pulled up this document, Think Piece, Risky Business, Nudging You to Make the Right Choices. And we've got some interesting names there, and Elizabeth Truss and Nick Bosanquet. So this is interesting because it's in 2009. It's prior to the Cabinet Office's document. And what it demonstrates is that Liz Truss was hard at work bringing this type of political applied behavioural psychology into government in order to manipulate people's minds. So it's boasting here that she's previously worked for Shell Cable and Wireless and the Communication Group, where she was head of public affairs. And of course, she's read philosophy, politics and economics at Oxford University. But let's have a look at the document here. Now, this is Reform, which is a change, a transformation think tank linking in with the insurance people. So the introduction here, I'll read it very quickly. One of the top reads in Whitehall and Westminster last year was the book by Richard Taylor and Cass Sunstein that described using behavioural economics to nudge customers towards making better choices on complex subjects. However, the idea of subtly shaping the right choices has been a key element of insurance long before nudge theory or even many of the preceding behavioral economics theories. Nevertheless, nudge theory benefits both the insurer and the insured. So it goes on and it says that the think tank Reform provides an alternative perspective on nudge theory, exploring its potential rewards as well as risk. So you really need to get hold of this document or freeze this page to read the detail here. But I've just chosen a bit of it to give you an idea of what happens. It says the choice architect. At the heart of the thinking in nudge is the idea of allowing a choice architect to help guard against some unforeseen risk or uninsured against eventualities. The choice architect is someone who sets the parameters for a decision, for example, laying out the vegetables in greengrocers or designing the welfare system. The authors of Nudge believe it's possible for the government to hire a competent expert to design a choice environment in which individuals have an easier time making good decisions.
I presume by the fact that they're only given limited choices in the first place.
Absolutely. The government selects the choices that you will be given so that you make the right decision. This is it's mind-blowing, really. So here's some of the bullet points in their summary. There are many cases where poor information or human psychology can impede effective decision making. So the government is going to help you because you're just a poor person. You need Liz Truss to make the decisions.
And by effective decision making, they mean the decision that they want.
They want, absolutely. Nudge theory is a potential solution to some of the problems identified, and then it goes on to the book. So these two, Thaler and Sunstein, have become the gurus, and they were working at the heart of the British government at one stage. At the heart of thinking in nudge is the idea of allowing the choice architect. Well, we've covered that. And if we go on, a more nudged world with the government leading its citizens more and more towards particular uniform behaviours begins to look like one with a more technocratic managerial state. So we are all being herded so that we're only going to think what the government tells us. And then the insurance company boasts that it's already demonstrating that nudging can work because insurers are now offering products whose premium are linked to what they see in the psychology of people in their everyday lives. And finally, the key to nudge working in society's best interest is openness and transparency. But this, of course, is the great lie because the government has consistently hidden its nudge efforts. So two key paragraphs here. The concept of nudging people into the right behaviour rather than being compelled appeals to those on both the right and left of the political spectrum, as it is superficially non-intrusive and positive in outcome. Superficially.
Yes.
Okay. And the problem with risk. If enough difficult contingencies are imagined, it can have the effect of making the risk seem exceedingly dangerous, even though this does not represent their likelihood of occurring. And of course, what are we seeing in this paragraph from 2009? We are seeing what they did as part of the Spy B team around COVID when their own minutes showed that they were going to use aggressive nudges to make people fearful in order that people obeyed the government's lockdown and social distancing. So political, psychological nudging using fear and anxiety to lock people in their homes. Here's Reform, this is the organisation that she was working in. Very difficult to find out who they really are. You can see people, but who controls them, who's controlling the money? You did some research, Mike, and well, then it gets very interesting because the transformation think tank is driven by.
Well, first of all, that's their sponsorship for 2021, and it looks like a very small amount of money. So that's a bit fishy for a start. But in the text that goes with this, it says we're sponsored by the usual tax-exempt foundations and so on. But that's the list. This is their transparent list for sponsorship. So we've got Amazon there in 24,500. BBC, Deloitte, Fujitsu, Imperial College, KPMG, Microsoft, MSD, Sanofi, Tortoise. Was a very small amount of money, £500 from Tortoise, hardly surprising. But then we come on to their corporate sponsors, partner organizations. And who do we have? We've got Pfizer, Moderna, and we've got BT and Fujitsu and so on. But Pfizer and Moderna certainly jump out. And then if we look at their more academic partners, we have the usual suspects of Imperial College and so on. So we've got Imperial College, the Forum, we've got King's College London, we've got Manchester College, and we've got Manchester University, University of York. So what do we make of that?
Well, we've got all of these commercial interests, some very powerful commercial interests, running the think tank to transform government and society as they want. This is, if we want to talk democracy, which the government likes to talk about, this is nothing about democracy. This is about lobbying on a massive scale by global corporate interests operating through reform. We can't say these people were supporting reform in 2009 because we don't yet know, but it's interesting that we could possibly have a prime minister groomed by these very interests to use applied psychology to help build their businesses. Or are we missing something?
Don't think so.
I don't think so. So if we come to reform in the present day, here's is she the director or the editor? Need some glasses, director, and Charlotte Pickles. Now, you can read her CV, but what caught my eye at the bottom was she said, I'm privileged to be a member of the Social Security Advisory Committee and the NHS Assembly. Well, many people will have no idea what the NHS Assembly is. So pop it on screen. The Assembly brings together a range of individuals from across the health and care sectors at regular intervals to advise the joint boards of NHS England and NHS Improvement on delivery of the NHS long-term plan. So we've got a lobbying group sitting in bed with major changes to the NHS, and they're talking here about a guiding coalition. The Assembly membership brings broad stakeholder insight and frontline experience to discussions serving as a guiding coalition. So the guiding coalition, I'm going to say, acts as the body to nudge what people should think and do. And the insurance body that was involved right in the document right at the beginning of this segment, Chartered Insurance Institute, why are they interested in nudging? Well, the medical healthcare market, this is back in 2018, I believe, is £214.4 billion. Yeah.
Okay, and well, on Monday's program, we were talking about Joe Biden's fantastic speech in front of the red and black background, and of course, one of the points that one of the areas that he was focusing in on was the issue of free and fair elections. Mark.
Yeah, this is the real turning point, the real crux here. Okay, so August 2021, I believe the dates were, the well-known pillow entrepreneur, there you see him right there, Mike Lindell, he paid for the entire conference in Springfield, Missouri, called Moment of Truth, bought everybody's food, got everybody together, including Trump people, Steve Bannon and others. And of course, Mike Lindell himself fits that category. And he put out a all points bulletin that everybody needs to go to their county officials. There's a little over 3,200 counties in the United States, 254 in Texas alone, 83 here in Michigan. Everybody needs to go to their counties and get what are called cast vote records. And evidently these are key records. And the article that's available from American Free Press that we're seeing here explains what those are. But these cast vote records apparently could enable anyone to detect at least some evidence of election fraud. And of course, there was a major focus on Georgia. One of my main contacts, Garland Favorito of Voters Organized for Trusted Election Results in Georgia, or voterga.org. He was there. He met the Trump people, one of my main contacts. and he gave the presentation where Georgia is shown to be among the states with the strongest evidence of massive election fraud. I've talked on this show before about hundreds of thousands of digital ballot images being missing, literally missing. And so this was a major coming together of all this data, and the call to arms was to get these cast vote records. And in fact, I went to my county, quick note here, I asked the clerk, Sharon Tyler, who I happen to know here in Michigan, Berrien County, for the cast vote records, and they claimed they didn't have them. But Garland told me that essentially there was no way they couldn't have them because they're embedded and integral in the election data that must be kept after a given election under federal law for at least 22 months. That federal law deadline for ballot retention and all the other election data, that deadline expired September 3rd, just a couple days ago. So I'm still going to be calling more counties in Texas and Michigan to see if they have that data. But everything that was presented at that Missouri conference, much of it, if not all of it, showed extensive election fraud proof and evidence throughout most of the states. And yet Joe Biden and his ilk are basing their whole narrative, a big New York Times editorial, all this, on the idea that election fraud is literally not even possible in any significant extent in the United States. I mean, that is an audaciously erroneous statement to make. And the whole narrative rests on that linchpin that we have to have an article of faith that elections are pretty much crystal clear in the United States. Participate, yes. Vote all you want, but don't look under the hood. That's the message.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much for that, Mark. Okay, if you like what the UK column does and you would like to support us, then please head over to community.ukcolumn.org. There are options to help us out there, or you can pick something up at the UK column shop. But please do share as much material as you find on the various platforms as far and wide as you can. Now, a few days ago, the LaRouche organization published this, Ukraine's death list database. This is the Mirovret's website on Ukraine, which is basically listing people. It's effectively a hit list of people that are pushing out a counter Ukrainian narrative, apparently. And of course, they were on that list quite extensively. This is just a look at that website. If you want to remember what it looks like, it's quite unpleasant. Now, tonight they will be holding, or this afternoon in the UK, they will be holding a press conference on Zoom. The URL is on screen at the moment, so that's us02web.zoom.us/J/861611511099. Starts at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. UK time, 5 p.m. obviously in Europe, and quite a number of people taking part in that. I believe Eva Bartlett will be asking a question, and of course she was on the hit list herself, so do get along and watch that if you can.
And of course, Zelensky's not doing anything to stop this, now friend of the Prime Minister. So presumably the Prime Mercenary, the lady that wanted people to go and fight, supports this.
Of course, yes.
Okay, well, let's come over to you, Debi, and you've been doing some really good work having a look at where the future of the NHS goes. But before we get to that one, you want to remind us that it was only a couple of months ago that they were using dogs in order to nudge, that's the correct term, nudge children into being vaccinated.
Yeah, that's right. Wasn't that long ago, was it? And there you can see that the Cornwall one where they were using therapy dogs, and we were talking about this, and we were very concerned that they were kind of incentivizing parents to take their children to these vaccination units during the summer holidays. And so then, do you remember we found a document which was the Committee of Public Accounts, and I saw in the summer that they were going to target 5 to 11-year-olds this autumn. And it was very concerning because originally the JCVI had said that children they weren't at risk, they didn't need the jab. If you remember, Chris Whitty overturned it. It was going to be a one-off offer. But then all of a sudden we saw them sneak in this plan to vaccinate 5 to 11-year-olds this autumn. And you know what? Amazingly, we managed to interview Dr. Dr. Christian Buckland and Dr. Ros Jones to talk about this very thing and our concerns about children. And all of a sudden, folks. This is such good news. I'm so excited. 5-year-olds will no longer be targeted in England. It's gone. It's gone. Unless a parent, sadly, wants their child vaccinated, or their child is deemed to be vulnerable or living with immunosuppressed parents, there is now no need to vaccinate 5 to 11-year-olds with COVID-19. No need whatsoever. It's been changed. It's in the Green Book. The Green Book is part of the UK HSA guidance. And this is fantastic news. So I would say a huge round of applause to all of those parents who decided to use their common sense and realize that their child was a very healthy child and didn't need or didn't want that injection. But what I would say is that the cost of the vaccination centres that they were going to be setting up with all of these incentives to get kids in, that's all gone by the wayside now. So what I would say is we mustn't take our foot off the pedal, because they could start introducing nasal vaccinations. So we need to watch out for those. And we also need to keep an eye on Scotland and Wales, because this is actually just for England. But it's great news for all of these 5 to 11-year-olds. So parents, if you're being pressurised by anybody, it's no longer a requirement. Well
Okay.
done, everyone.
Thank you for that summary, Debbie. We have a little bit of a Sky video here, which is talking about the issue around children and vaccines. Let's play a little bit of this, and then we'll have a look at some of the other information that you mentioned.
The question of vaccines for children has never been far away, but as schools return, the government's vaccine advisors have said no to jabs for younger teenagers.
I don't think it's a confusing decision. I think it's quite clear that the risks and benefits are finely balanced, but that other wider considerations, such as educational benefits, need to be taken into consideration before recommending universal vaccination for well children.
But Lisa, who's more vulnerable herself to COVID, wants her children vaccinated now.
Dumbfounded, really. I've got no idea how they've reached that conclusion. It seems like with an outlier again in comparison with the rest of the world. France, over 40% of eligible children have been vaccinated, millions done across America. I'd love to see the data in terms of educational disruption as well. I have no idea how they've reached that conclusion.
The Joint Committee on Vaccines and Immunisation's main concern was the link to incredibly rare cases of heart inflammation. 200,000 more young teenagers with heart, lung and liver conditions will now be able to get the vaccine, but it hasn't been recommended for healthy 12 to 15-year-olds. The chief medical officers are now going to be looking at this issue of vaccinating children, and they'll look too at the wider context. So to give you a sense of where we are with the data, in England, around 1 in 70 people had COVID last week. That's level with the week before. And you can see there in Scotland, the number is 1 in 75. That is a significant increase on the week before. And we're saying it is the highest.
We've come out of that clip, Debbie, to save a little bit of time, but we've got the impression this is the mainstream media really muddying the waters, that really we don't know what should be happening. They're constantly doing this rather than going and looking at the data and what the effects are. I don't know whether you'd like to respond to that.
Yeah, well, it's confusion again, isn't it? You know, it's just confusion. One person says one thing, it gets overridden by someone else. But the bottom line is that children are at very low risk. Children of all ages do not need or want this injection. And clearly now we've got a victory for the 5 to 11-year-olds at least, but we've got to be still aware that the older children, the 12 and onwards, are being injected, and still, of course, so are pregnant mums. So my eyes are still very much focused on this, but it's a really good piece of news. So anybody that's feeling pressured, don't feel pressured anymore.
Okay, now the key bit that you've been looking at alongside all of the turmoil around vaccines has been where the NHS is going, and I'm very, very sure that this is what Liz Truss is going to be pushing. This one from the BMJ entitled "The Brave New NHS." We've got a gentleman we're going to bring up on screen just a second called Eric Topol. What's going on here, Debbie? Where is the NHS going to?
It's gone. It's gone. We don't, people still refer to the NHS, the National Health Service. It's neither national, it's not health, and it's not serving anybody. So it doesn't exist. And where we're going is a very scary place. This is not brave. This is stupid. This is an automated AI, digitalized, augmented reality, remote control, all singing, all dancing, nanotechnology, terrifying future. That's where we're going.
Okay, and you've highlighted this particular man, Dr. Topol, as being a key person involved in the getting the whole agenda working. People can freeze the screen to have a look at the detail here that's on Wikipedia. Thank you, Wikipedia. Sorry, do you want to add something, Debbie?
No, I was just going to say, if you just want to flip through the slides, because actually they're quite self-explanatory, but you'll see the John Hopkins, Dr. Topol, meet Dr. Topol. He's American, and he's a cardiologist, but he's also into wireless medicine. Yes, you heard it correct, wireless medicine. That's what we're coming on to next. So do go and have a look at Dr. Topol, but you just might want to whiz through the slides because they are quite self-explanatory.
Well, we'll do the 2 video clips first of all. Let's hear what this man has to say. We can only give a little excerpt due to the time that we've got, but I think the audience will quickly pick up that there's something really fundamental happening here. And as you say, this is not very nice. Let's have a listen to what he says.
No one's ever done something like this. That is, taking this new set of tools that are unquestionably having a dramatic effect on healthcare's future, and to bring all the disciplines together, all the experts, and start to plan how to use these effectively. And what can we do to really benefit patients with all these newfound capabilities? The fact that you can get a warning on your wrist through your watch that your heart rhythm isn't right, or you could get your potassium in your blood through your watch. These are some things that we wouldn't have anticipated. So the fact that you can get your genome sequenced, that you can get your gut microbiome sequenced, there's so many ways to understand each human being like never before. What it means is we can get remarkably more productive, that we don't do mass screenings, but we know who should be watched for whatever particular condition, that in the future we could prevent things like asthma attacks and seizures and heart attacks and strokes, and far better management of things like diabetes and high blood pressure. So there's all sorts of opportunities of improving our workflow and patient management. Reading scans, slides, looking at skin lesions. These are all patterns that are better for machines to process at high throughput accurately and then have human clinical oversight. And that's where this is landing. This is a combination of doing the things best that machines do, but also that clinicians can do. There isn't any question that over time, and we're talking not just immediately, but in the 5 to 10 year time frame, we're going to see some immense productivity improvements. So for example, if somebody was instead of going into a regular hospital, they could go home and be on sensors and be continuously monitored.
So the key word used there, it's very faint, is productivity. He talks about productivity in relation to healthcare, and as Mike has just said to me, that's profit. Debbie, this is not just a man giving a sales pitch from anywhere to whoever's listening. This is the man already engaged to transform the NHS.
Oh, completely. And guess who commissioned him to do it? It was our good old friend Jeremy Hunt back in 2018. And for anybody that's interested, have a look at the Topol review because it's terrifying. But as I'm sure you'll agree, he was commissioned to look at the NHS in particular. So yet again, we can see the NHS being used as the experimental test bed globally to see what we're the experiment. The NHS is the experiment, and quite clearly this digitization and forward thinking of technology is going to hit us first. Thank you, Dr. Topol.
Thank you, Debbie. And the other thing that you've pointed out is, of course, that some people may go into the NHS and they'll get a discharge date given to them before they actually go into hospital. But the other thing you've been warning about is the intention is that people supposedly are all going to be treated at home. This is just a very short second part of Dr. Topol talking, but this gives us really the second major part of this policy that's being planned.
So this is something that's bigger than the NHS. It really will be transformative. That eventually, just a matter of time, that the patient will be truly the center. And clinicians will be rescued from the despair of not being able to care for patients well because they're so burdened with so much keyboards and administrative and all these other things that divert them from what they really want to do, why they went into healthcare and medicine in the first place. And then we obviously want to see the productivity in these health systems. So each of these areas will eventually be revolutionized over time. Maybe it'll take 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and we'll look back now in 2018 as this thing rolled out, is that we were able to really nail it of what is the biggest advantage of bringing all these tools together.
So think about his comments against the background of that £214 billion UK health market and the insurance companies sitting in the background working with the government to use applied psychology to skew the agenda so that they get the right profits out the system.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned insurance companies. Imagine what it would do to the insurance companies to have access to this type of biosurveillance that they're talking about here.
I think my reply to that, I'll look to Debbie, they are going to have access, Mike,
Yes,
because
yes,
this
no
data
question.
is going to be
Yes.
shared.
Yes.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so Debbie, you had these other slides here really just to help ram home the overview as to what's happening here. So we've got the Topol review, preparing the healthcare workforce to deliver the digital future. People can find that online and have a look. And this one, I found this very creepy because here we've got, is this designed for adults or is this for children? Or have we got adults being addressed as children? This is nudging the layout, the pictures, the cartoon faces. What's this one all about?
This is from the Topol review, and this is literally looking at what we can expect in 2029. So what will the doctor of 2029 look like? Actually, I think there'll probably be a bioengineer or a nanotechnologist or a scientist or a chemist, or maybe it's even Theresa Coffey, who knows. What the paramedic, the paramedic, there's going to be an autonomous ambulance. What's the role of the paramedic? What AI will they be using? This is the future, but it's being rolled out now. So if people just want to freeze the screen and have a look, but the Topol review is really fascinating. And it's biosensors, smart apps, you name it. It's coming to, well, it's here in the NHS now. This was back in 2018. So you can imagine how far forward we are now.
And none of this discussed with the public, all coming through the NHS Assembly. And I would guarantee 99.999% of the public never heard of the NHS Assembly. We'll do these quite quickly, but you're highlighting here the sorts of things that are coming through. So this is telemedicine, virtual fracture clinics, smartphone apps, computerized cognitive behavioral therapy. So now we're using psychology, but we're tying it in with AI. And I notice on the right hand of people's screens, we've got speech recognition and natural language processing, NLP. We're now mixing surveillance with AI with the use of applied psychology.
That's not neuro-linguistic programming. That's a different term.
Well, natural language. If you look at CBT in the NHS, Mike, what they are doing is using psychology on people in that CBT thing. And the natural language processing is, if I got this right, Debbie, this is picking up the tones in people's voices, which might suggest that they're sick.
Yeah, this is using vocal biomarkers. And we did talk about it a couple of newses ago, but people will be able to, or the algorithm, the bot will be able to pick up if you've got cancer, if you've got a fever, if you've got COVID, by bots, vocal bots, voice bots. So yeah.
Okay, we've got another one, medical press, wireless socks, monitoring the reduced rate of patient falls. You mentioned those a couple of UK column newses ago. Med gadget, wireless light implant without skull damage. And we've got one here, which I picked up on very quickly. This is you'd headed connect to your smartphone, 7 brain computer interface companies you need to know. And the first one there is BlackRock Neurotech. Did you get a warm feeling from this one?
No, I got, well, I mean, I wasn't, sadly, we're getting to the point now where we're never surprised and we expect to see BlackRock in everything. And clearly they're in neurotech. So I wasn't surprised, but I'm saddened.
Okay. And Mark, we're just about up for time, but I could see you nodding there. Of course, what is happening, what has almost happened is that our NHS as a public service has been wiped out, and it's been replaced by a profit-centred NHS system, which is, to me, very closely linked with Obamacare and that angle that we saw happening in the United States.
The nudging thing that you presented earlier and subsequent to that, showing Pfizer involved, it's showing clearer than I've seen in a long time the literal outright privatization of government. Not a little bit, not just on the fringes, but government as literally a private, opaque, corporate-based, not people-based, therefore undemocratic enterprise. I mean, it is absolutely strikingly and undeniably there now, if there were ever any doubts before. Some people call it the governmentalization of private corporations. It may be that to a point, depending on which end of the telescope you look down, but it is absolutely striking that now the new constituency is literally corporations. The people aren't even part of it except to be used as lab rats. Yes, some of those technological wizardries and digital things, they might be useful to have a few readings sent to you on your watch. There isn't anything necessarily wrong with some elements of it. The problem is the context, who's in control and why. They never ask the question, because we can do this, should we? And so it's just a given in the belief system of those that are involved in this system that technology for its own sake has to be applied across everything. Everything has to be digitalized, and there's never any ethical question. Should we do this? All they say is we can do this, therefore we will. As if technology has no inherent limits, when of course it should have some inherent limits. Computers aren't for everything, including voting and vote counting, as we've learned. So this idea that you just digitalize and computerize everything for its own sake is just insanity.
Yeah. Mark, thank you very much. Excellent summing up. And what have we got to do? We've got to keep our finger on the pulse. We've got to keep lifting the stones, and we've got to expose what these people are doing. So, Mark, thank you very much for joining us. Debbie, thank you for joining us. We will have an extra time in a few minutes, but we're going to end the news today with a piece of music from one of the very good groups that were present at Katie Jo's event a few weeks ago. We've said we're keen to put out music to try and lift people up. This particular track we thought was very good, and we'll end our news today with their Time Is Running Out. And we'd like to say a big thank you to Paul Terry for allowing us to play out this video.
It's another strain. Without delay, we must break away. We know the news is not our views, it's just abuse made to confuse. The time is running out. The time is running out. The poison dart will break your heart. It must be stopped before the clot. Arrest these men, they can't pretend. they're paid to lie, they're not innocent. Their time is running out. Their time is running out. They'll never break us. They'll never enslave us. We've read the light, we know the lies, the parasites with demon eyes. Arrest these men, they can't pretend, they're paid to lie, they're not innocent. Their time is running out. 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 The time is running out.